I've been doing a lot of research into the Victoria line lately. It was that or become an international jet-setting playboy. An embryonic version of the Victoria line was known by the name London Plan Working Party Route C. And that set me thinking, what were routes A and B? And how far down the alphabet did this thing go? So I acquired a copy of this, the London Plan Working Party Report to the Minister for Transport. It is a slim volume that was surprisingly expensive. Good thing the sponsors have been generous recently. It turns out that the lines they were planning back in 1949 go all the way down to M, and then some. Today we're going to look at one of those lines, so I think it makes sense to start with Route A. So let me give you a bit of background. In 1943, the County of London plan was devised. The war was still raging, but the government were planning for peace. London had taken a hammering, and many saw this as the opportunity for a new start. The County of London plan, which was published in 1946, was the most radical plan for the restructuring of the city since the days of Christopher Wren. Transport was an essential part of this. Of course, it's all very well talking about what we could do, in theory. But while the Allies won the war, Britain came out of the conflict bruised. The County of London plan was a nice idea, but there was a big question mark over how much of it was practical, useful, and, most importantly, affordable in the post-war economy. The London Plan Working Party was made up of people with more technical know-how to look at the proposals, to see what could actually be done, and to see how it would fit in with other plans that were in play at the time. Their report came out in 1949. Route A is referred to as a tube line, but I think that what we're looking at is the prototype for Thameslink. It does have a number of very significant differences, though. One of the things the County of London plan called for was the demolition of all the rail bridges over the River Thames along with the viaducts in Southwark. It was felt that these formed barriers that physically divided communities. The Working Party cut this back significantly. Charing Cross and Cannon Street could stay in view of how busy they were. Blackfriars Bridge at the time was less important. Passenger trains over the bridge went to Holborn Viaduct, which was one of the less popular central London termini. There were freight trains that crossed the bridge and went on through Snow Hill Tunnel, but that was a Victorian tunnel that couldn't take the larger, more modern freight locomotives. Blackfriars Bridge itself was somewhat elderly at this point and would likely require replacement, so it was a solid candidate for the demolition ball. So too were Blackfriars and Holborn Viaduct stations, and the Snow Hill Tunnel, though the Working Party had some very different plans for that. The County of London plan proposed replacing the line into Holborn Viaduct with a new line in a tunnel, from Loughborough Junction, through Elephant and Castle, Waterloo, Ludgate Circus, Holborn Viaduct, Mount Pleasant and King's Cross, finally emerging at Finsbury Park. This was known as Route 6. Now, ignoring for a moment the bridge and tunnel business, this is quite similar to the Thameslink route through central London we have now. Thameslink doesn't go to Waterloo. Ludgate Circus and Holborn Viaduct become City Thameslink. The line runs straight under Mount Pleasant with no station, and King's Cross Thameslink has been replaced by St Pancras. But otherwise we have a similar setup. The Working Party was sceptical. Their report recommends routing the line further to the west to give better interchange with the Underground. And they suggest that there's nowhere to put a station at King's Cross, so the line should go through Euston instead. They were also of the opinion that the connections were unbalanced. The line would be connecting to commuter lines north and south of London, but the commuter lines in the south were far busier than in the north, so they suggested also connecting to the Midland Main Line to Luton. Their revised version was Route A. The first order of business was electrification. The lines to Luton and Hitchin were not electrified at the time, but they'd have to be if they were to connect with the services south of the river, which were. The particular southern lines they envisaged connecting with were the Chatham Main Line, the Catford Loop, and the line to Sutton via Wimbledon. Going south to north, the line would still begin at Loughborough Junction. The first station would be Elephant and Castle, where there would be interchange with the Bakerloo and Northern lines. Next, Ludgate Circus, which would have been the approximate location of City Thameslink. Here there would have been interchange with Route D. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but that would have been a tube line from Liverpool Street to Yeading Lane. And that sounds like an excuse for another video. There would also have been interchange with the District Line's Blackfriars station, which would have been spared demolition. Then there would have been a stop at Chancery Lane, which would have provided interchange with the Central Line. Now, there was an underground bunker at Chancery Lane that had been constructed during the war as part of a planned Central Line express route. I don't know if that was incorporated, or if they were planning to just go under it, or if they'd even thought about it. Then Russell Square for interchange with the Piccadilly Line. Next was Euston, which of course is an important main line terminus. There would have been interchange with the Northern Line and the Metropolitan and Circle lines at Euston Square. There was also to be interchange with Route C, which was, as I said, an early version of the Victoria Line. Here, Route A would branch in two. One branch would head to Finsbury Park, where it would surface and join the main line to Hitchin. The other would head ever so slightly west of there, with a station at Finchley Road and interchange with the Metropolitan and Bakerloo lines. And finally surface just south of Cricklewood before heading up to St Albans. There are a number of housing developments being put up north of London, as well as a new town at Stevenage, and Route A was seen as an essential means of improving the services to those places. The total cost of all this was estimated at £39 million, and let's just say that you wouldn't get a railway for that nowadays. Now, I love an unbuilt line. I've long since lost count of how many videos I've made on unbuilt lines, but what interests me about this one is that it was devised for a very different version of London to the one we have today. The London this report was produced for, and the rail network it was produced for, were very different. There were still steam trains. The railways had just been nationalised. Freight was an important part of through London traffic. Euston looked like this. There was no Jubilee line, and the Victoria line was only in its planning stages. The airports of London were considerably smaller. The Port of London was an enormous centre of industry. So too was South London. So it's really hard to say how successful this line would have been had it been built. I think it would have been well used, and of course many elements would resurface, so to speak, with the Thameslink line that opened in 1988. Thameslink was a drastically simplified version of the line. No new tunnels, no bridge demolition. They did manage to fit a station in at King's Cross after all, and relatively few interchanges with the Underground. Despite all that, it operates some of the busiest services in the whole UK. I guess the message is, when planning a new railway line, it pays not to overthink things. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I'd like to cover more of the proposals from the report, because some of them are really interesting, so look out for that in future. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the reluctant admission of the lack of necessity of Blackfriars Rail Bridge to my proposal to demolish Blackfriars Rail Bridge. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.